I've had a very fortunate life, and I've had some really wonderful opportunities to do things that not everybody gets to do. And I've had some terrible loss that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Uh, but if I hadn't have decided to move forward after losing my family and hadn't accepted the love that I had for Hillary, I wouldn't have had all that. And pushing myself to embrace that and to try hard at it and to lean into it took me to some of the highest highs that I think humans can have, certainly that I've ever had. And, you talked about Lhotse as being one of those good runs. It was definitively the best ski run of my life. It also included some of the worst snow I've ever skied and some of the best. But I wouldn't have been there had I not been there with Hillary. And we did that mountain. We climbed that mountain together and pushed each other a lot to make it there, and took a lot out of it together as partners, and both as climbing partners and life partners. And I'm going to try to figure out how to go do all of that and write a whole nother book in my life and find out what's next.
Hello and welcome to the Duffel Shuffle. I'm Adrian Ballinger, and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Kiekefer. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffel Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us.
Welcome back to episode 6 of the Duffel Shuffle. It's Monday, June 17th. Adrian, how's it going?
Good. I'm not jet lagged anymore. As we were getting ready for this, we realized we recorded last week, but I have no memory of that whatsoever. So I think I'm back on track. Beautiful day in Tahoe.
It was like the day you had gotten back. There was probably some sleep medication in there, I don't blame you.
Exactly right. But now I'm back to, doing some bigger runs, starting to rock climb again and train a little bit, get ready for going to South Africa, and been spending a load of time with the family.
Awesome. Well, we just had a great interview with Jim Morrison. Looking forward to getting that one out there. But kind of some interesting news, not our normal news topic. Apple has announced that they're going to have a software update. I believe it's iOS 18 that allows.
I would have said 16.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes, I'm behind.
I think I've seen stuff on the internet about iOS 18, but the meat of it that kind of impacts us in the outdoors is that we're going to be able to use satellite technology for communication straight from our iPhone. So the days of Garmin InReach Minis and all of the satellite communication devices and Wi-Fi that you use over in the Himalaya theoretically are no longer going to be necessary.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting update. I mean, obviously, for people who had iPhone 15s, they added satellite technology to allow for SOSs. So, and actually, they were automated, right? If you got in a car crash or you took a big fall, I think Gear's phones were like setting off emergencies. But I think that functionality has been useful. But it's been a long time since I've spent time in the mountains where I've not only been able to call sort of an SOS emergency, but also been able to text my family or ask a friend for a weather forecast, things like that. And that takes two-way satellite texting. InReach Minis from Garmin and all the other options like Spots and Zolios, they've been kind of just essential piece of equipment in climbers and skiers' backpacks for, a decade, 2 decades now. And to have that just brought into an iPhone, I think is a incredible update, mainly because it's going to remove one more barrier of cost, people being safer in the mountain. One less thing you need to pay for. It's one less subscription. It's also one less thing you need to decide, are you going to carry or not in your pack when you're paring down, which is especially common in rock climbing. So I think it's going to make us safer out there. I would add one caveat, which is just iPhone batteries have nothing on Garmin InReach batteries. One of the beauties of the Garmin InReach is like I could leave it in my pack for a month at a time, not even think about it, and know when I turn it on, it's going to have 60, 70% power. We all know our phones struggle to get through a big day. So that's definitely, when I'm thinking about like what I'm going to tell mountain guides or my clients about how they should use these when they're out on their adventures on their own. I do think considering how you're going to charge it, it'll go essential. And that might still leave a place for another dedicated device.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I always have an external battery for my phone when I'm doing a big day in the mountains because navigation, it's super important. But one step beyond that is knowing that I can get a message out on that InReach Mini. It's not ideal. It's best if you have your iPhone to text something out and have them paired, but it still is possible with your iPhone battery completely dead and that external battery used up. So now it's like one level beyond that. I just found a new brand. I believe it's a new brand called Nightcore, and they're making like a carbon fiber wrapped external battery. So it's supposed to be the lightest external battery on the market, smallest external battery out there.
$1,200 external
Oh no,
battery.
but it was honestly pretty comparable to the Anchors or the other notable brands out there. So little shout out to this new brand that I discovered for the lightest I could
All
find
right.
on the external battery front.
Actually, I need the link on that. On my flight home from China, I don't know if I told you the story, but there was a new rule leaving China. Lithium batteries have always been difficult to fly with in Asia. They're a little more concerned about it than we are, but we've always been able to carry them on and bring as many as we needed to. And this year on the flight out, they decided there was a new limit that you can only have 8 lithium batteries per person. And I think I had 46, which included all my satellite phone batteries, all my lens, like sock batteries, glove batteries, camera batteries, GoPro batteries. And I think I had 5 power banks for Everest and lost them all because I had to choose the 8 most expensive batteries I wanted to take home with me. I'm in the market for a new power bank.
There you go. Interesting. I wonder where they came up with 8 as opposed to 9 or 10.
8, yeah, right. 8 was the number today. We didn't see it in writing anywhere, so maybe the security team just really wanted some new power banks. But I think it is going to be, it's a little PSA for people traveling to China. But in general, I also lost all of my lens stock batteries flying out of Switzerland this season with new limitations. So it is something we might see more of and could be complicated for our outdoor industry, especially our photography friends, how we get all the lithium places having in.
Yeah, well, cool update from Apple there. Will be interesting to see if that ends up being a subscription, added cost or what the usability is of it. But the technology is there, and so it's nice that it's going to become more available to us as just the average day consumer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited for it. Being able to use emojis and just my normal iMessages with friends. Apparently only blue bubbles will work, not green bubbles. So green bubbles will still be, second-class citizens. But along those lines, I did just hear that there might be certain Android phones that will be linking stalling. And I guess maybe that would be even the next step beyond Apple. In China this year, when we met Chinese climbers using Huawei phones, they seamlessly switched from cellular to satellite and had data as well as messaging capabilities. So, I'm busy being all excited about my iPhone having satellite texting, but maybe that's just a stepping stone towards satellite data ability on our phone. Let's see. Like you said, tech is not actually our expertise. So maybe we should move on.
Yeah, absolutely. What else do you have?
Well, one other story I was so excited about, obviously we're wrapping up the 8,000, or we have wrapped up the 8,000 meter climbing season in Nepal and Tibet. Now the action is kind of moving over to Pakistan in the summer season where everyone's just getting started. And I think interesting stories coming out of Pakistan in the upcoming months. But past the point where I thought the season was done in Nepal, a team led by Gelji Sherpa, who's kind of went viral last year for carrying a climber down from way up high in the death zone. And it was also one of the just youngest, strongest alpinists coming out of Nepal. put up a new route on Cho-Oyu, the sixth tallest mountain in the world, from the Nepal side of the mountain. And he did it weeks after everyone thought the season was done. I found it exciting for a couple of reasons. One, Gelji is just this great example of Nepali climbers who are climbing at a really high level, technically and physically, and doing it not only for their clients, was leading a client in this case, but also doing it for passion. Like you see the photos from the climb, the route was rad. He's just has these huge smiles, and like you listen to the videos, he was so excited. It was his third attempt to put a route up from the Nepal side, and he finally succeeded. That's the fun side. I think the sort of like other interesting part to it is that many Nepali operators have been talking about wanting to make Cho-Oyu climbable from the Nepal side of the mountain for clients because of the challenges of climbing from the Chinese side of the mountain. And while this was with one client, it was 8 Sherpa, led by Gelji, that made the route possible. And it is absolutely not what I would call a commercial guiding line. Technical, hard rock and ice climbing with a bunch of overhead hazard. They got it done. It's rad. I don't think we're going to start seeing a quote unquote normal route from Nepal.
Does it make you well, obviously the benefit to having a normal route on the Nepal side of Cho-Oyu is that it's a great kind of entry level 8,000 meter peak. Not dealing with the Chinese government logistically makes it a little bit easier. Does it make you think there could be another route option on the Nepal side, or does it kind of wipe off that entire side of the mountain completely?
Yeah, no, I think this has been one of many attempts over the past few years since Tibet was closed the past 4 years, and there were all these kind of record seekers that wanted to climb all 4,000 meters. They wanted to get Cho-Oyu done. Been so many attempts on this side. I think any alpinist or mountain guide could have told you not a commercial guiding route on the Nepal side of Cho-Oyu, and I think that now solidifies that. But just because there's not a non-technical route on the Nepal side doesn't mean people shouldn't go with their clients to like this. Like what they accomplished was rad, and apparently the client they brought, I'm name, but apparently he was like a very competent client who worked hard to build skills and was doing things like carrying rope and sort of supporting the rope fixing team, almost like an assistant Sherpa or something like that. So I do hope we see a lot more of that, and that we seeing non-standard routes be climbed in the 8,000 meter peaks, but we shouldn't pretend or sell that that's a normal route when it's.
Well, it's kind of a great reminder that climbing in the Himalaya doesn't have to be based on, it doesn't have to be these normal routes, these big commercialized expeditions. There are cool things that can be done, and they can be done guided. They can be done with, high-end clients that are being guided. They're paying for an expedition, but they're also part of a team in a different sense than they might normally be on a more commercialized route. So cool story all around. And like you said, having Sherpas climbing for themselves and having that passion as opposed to it just being a job is really awesome to see.
Yeah, we're just going to see a lot, kind of like we were talking to Jim about from a skiing perspective. Like we've only scratched the surface from a ski perspective in the Himalaya and big mountains. But when you kind of broaden what mountain guiding can look like, or you broaden who climbing and the technical skills of Sherpa as well as mountain guides, like, yeah, there is so much more to be done. Just need to break away from, or not even break away from it. It's okay that there are 20 standard routes in the Himalaya that 80% of people are going to go to. I think that's fine. It's actually like a popular trail in Yosemite or the Grand Canyon. But that doesn't mean that 99% of those places are completely untouched, waiting for adventure from people who want to experience that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Adrian. Stay tuned for an awesome episode with Jim Morrison.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference. Welcome back to the Duffel Shuffle podcast. I am excited for a few reasons. First of all, my first podcast recording back in Lake Tahoe, not on Mount Everest or lost somewhere in China. So we actually get to be in person today with in my house with Sam Kekeffer. Welcome back, Sam.
Thanks. That shows your 8,000 meter brain because we recorded you and I when you got back.
This is not my first Tahoe episode, but it's the first one I'm excited about. And the other reason I'm excited
Thanks.
is because of our guest today. Today we have Jim Morrison with us here in the house. And we're going to have all of you already, I'm sure, are familiar with Jim's exploits. For me, Jim and I have been friends for coming up on a decade now. Probably started when I moved to Tahoe. I had just heard of Jim Morrison and his brother John Morrison and kind of the legends they were here in town. It actually we didn't actually meet in Tahoe. We met in the Himalaya. I think Amar Blam was the first peak we got to climb together. And so really a lot of my time with Jim has been on the biggest mountains in the world and in the Himalaya. But a lot of my favorite times with Jim have been here in Tahoe, where every day gets out, he plays hard, he trains hard, and just, I think for so many of us here, provides an example of a way to live and a passion for living despite hardship, and finding, never losing sight of the importance of getting out every day with people you care for and love and playing hard. So, Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you. Good to be here.
Absolutely. And, based on that intro, I think, we have Jim right now in between adventures. We were just talking before we got online. You're going rock climbing tomorrow. Should we start by talking about rock climbing? Are you a rock climber, Jim Morrison?
I'd like to be a rock climber. Yeah, I've done a lot of skiing, and I really enjoy rock climbing in my time off from skiing.
Fantastic. So, when did you shift this season, or are you still skiing while also climbing?
Well, I skied yesterday,
You did.
if that is believable, here in Lake Tahoe.
It is June 17th. So Jim went skiing on June 16th. How was the skiing?
It was amazing. I was not interested in going skiing, but Jeremy Jones asked me to go with Mia and Cass, his kids, and the four of us e-biked up into the hills and then walked up some snow and skied some steep, sun-cupped, dirty couloir that was super, super fun. And we had a great day, and it reminded me of skiing's just fun. You don't often go out shredding in the hills with your buddies and not have a really good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's rad. I have to admit, having very little interest to go search out snow right now. But Sam, when was the last time you skied?
I skied on Shasta at the end of May, and it felt like the end of my ski season, mostly because the sun cups were getting towards knee deep and just not as enjoyable. But there are some patches around here. I mean, I'm sure, were you in Blackwood?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some patches that look pretty appealing, and you'll see turns down Chute 75 when you're going up to climb the Via and things like that. So people are getting after it still.
That is fantastic. How many weeks do you think you'll go now without skiing, if you had to guess?
Till winter.
Dozens, perhaps.
Okay.
I haven't skied since the middle of May, and I didn't have any intention of skiing, but when the right person asks you to go do something fun in the mountains, you say yes.
Absolutely. And is that the plan tomorrow then as well in terms of climbing?
Yeah, we're going to go climb, and it's going to be awesome. It's supposed to be cold and windy, and we're going to call it a training day, I guess.
Absolutely. Do you think, we joke around a lot about kind of training for all the things that come in big mountains. Do you actually think that is important to kind of go out on shitty days and get beaten up, and is it important to keep that muscle?
For sure. I think, I always try to put myself in more difficult situations, whether it's steeper, icier conditions than I would want to be in the big mountains skiing on or climbing in, or just bad weather. You can do those at home in your home mountain range. And then when you're in the big mountains, you're like, this is chill. Earlier this winter, I was out and it was blowing 100 miles an hour and it was raining sideways and I was climbing vertical water ice. So yeah, training in bad conditions make the mountains feel more benign.
I actually think skiing in Tahoe, there's a lot to be said for that. Like, we might not have the rowdiest like terrain, of course, here in our backyard, at least not really close by. But we often have really, really incredible conditions and then really, really terrible conditions. Like, I think there are a lot of other places in the US that stay kind of more in a middle zone. We have these, and I think it's a powerful or useful thing about here that if you go and ski on the really terrible days in Tahoe, it's a great place to build or at least remind yourself of the skills needed for skiing terrible snow in big mountains.
I always talk about durability, and it's like you can be the fittest athlete in the gym, but if you don't have durability, your hardness with weather, your tendons, your ligaments are like used to being on uneven trail, you're going to fall apart. And that's just a reality no matter how fit you are in the gym. And I think that's kind of what you guys are getting at. It's like that durability towards the elements.
Yeah.
Oh.
I like that.
Absolutely. Well, I mentioned Tahoe. Let's start there. I'm sure a lot of people know your story, Jim, but I forget it. Like, how did you end up in Tahoe? Did you choose this place, or is this always home?
I grew up in Walnut Creek, California, and which is in the Bay Area, and we came to Tahoe a lot on the weekends, and sometimes in the summer, sometimes in the winter. And then I started coming every weekend in the winter when I was in high school, and eventually moved here my senior year of high school. Finished independent study so that I could ski every day. And then I went to college in Reno and just never stopped skiing.
And did you ever think this wouldn't be home base? I mean, I know you spent a lot of time in Chamonix and Telluride and lots of places, but you always think this would be home?
It just kind of always was. It just sort of, I grew up into Tahoe and moved here, and my aspirational people all were from here, and I followed Scott Schmidt and the Deloriers and Kevin Andrews and sort of the original extreme team from the North Face to Lake Tahoe, and wanted to be that big mountain skier. And yeah, this was the epicenter of that culture back in the day. I mean, I think it was really here in Tahoe and in Chamonix. So those two places became home for me. And yeah, I never really looked anywhere else until 2015 when I met a girl, and I think I turned to you and I said, well, I don't know how this is going to work. It's not like I'm going to move to Telluride.
But there's a pretty good combination of the two that you've been living for years.
Yeah. So now I live in Telluride, Colorado, and I commute back and forth between Tahoe and Telluride. And I spend a lot of time in both of those places, and I spend a lot of time other places too.
And how would you describe it? I mean, of course, there's communities in both places that are important, but what do you seek in each place in terms of, let's say, training, skiing, and summer activities? Like,
I mean, I'll start with Tahoe. Tahoe is this incredible community. It's California. It's always sunny here. When it snows, it just dumps a couple feet overnight, and then it's sunny the next morning. It's this idyllic paradise place. Some people don't believe it, but that's why 38 million people live in California. It's pretty nice.
pretty special.
And it's the community in Tahoe specifically is just like nowhere else I've ever been. It's a really special group of friends and special bunch of people that have always been there for me through the highs and lows in my life. And yeah, it's spectacular. And then contrast that with Telluride. It's this wildly dramatic valley with super rugged mountains that are really tall right outside of town. And you can run up a trail that's 1.5 miles or 2 miles long and be 4,000 feet above your house pretty easily. And the drama of that mountain range is really provides a different outlet.
It certainly feels different. Every time I fly into that valley, I'm like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, the San Juans in general are so unique. How much of your time in Telluride are you spending in the Telluride Valley versus exploring the San Juan Range?
Well, hopefully more of the latter than the former, but I spend a lot of time inside talking on the phone and working and catching up on life. But that's what's so special about Telluride is just getting outside and how quickly you can get up high and have that feeling like you're up in the mountains and you're above it all, and you got a lot of vertical relief around you. And I think for those of us who just love that mountain lifestyle, that's a big part of it, just getting up high in the mountains.
Absolutely. Okay, well, you mentioned being inside on a computer or phone. So, you essentially have 2 full-time jobs, is how I think about it, maybe 3. Describe your work scene a little bit. And are you looking for any more careers to add on, or are you good?
I'm good at the moment. Well, I have I'm a skier. I'm a ski mountaineer specifically, and I have a lifestyle climbing up and skiing down mountains and getting supported by companies like the North Face and others. And then I have this little construction business here in Lake Tahoe where we build really big, fancy, audacious dream homes for affluent clients. And that's been a really strong passion of mine for a long time. And I've worked really hard at that business and have some amazing people that are there that have been there for a really long time. And that sort of provides me the lifestyle to be able to go do the skiing and manage the construction business from afar. And then I add a lot of other stuff in that mix. I do a lot of work with Protect Our Winters and some other nonprofit stuff.
So, does the balance work? The juggle, like, is it?
Yeah, I tend to have this, I don't know, attribute where if I have any space in my life, I get frustrated and I try to shove something into that box. So I tend to work best when I'm maxed and I'm overloaded and I got to get it all done. And when I get caught up, I figure out how to take on more and add more into it. And it seems to work. Seem to keep a pretty good balance. I certainly don't like days where I'm forced to take days off from being outside or running, getting up into the mountains, but occasionally that happens. And it's been a life goal of mine to not have a lot of forced days off
Yeah,
from work.
it's a lot. Suddenly, the window I see into your life, it's quite full, and like you said, that's intentional. I know I struggle. It's easy to let my training drop off when things get really full. Is that something you struggle with, or is training, like for Emily, training is first, right? If you ask Emily what her jobs are, like training, Emily Harrington, my wife, also on the North Face gym, for anyone new to the podcast.
Episode 1 of the Duffel Shuffle.
Episode 1 of the Duffel Shuffle. Like for her, she's very clear. Job 1 is training for her primary sport. Job 2 is her sponsor obligations. And then job 3, like, I don't know, helping me or, whatever. And of course, we have a family and things like that as well. But like, how do you sort of prioritize, and does it work?
I think I try to balance all of them, and generally I do a good job of juggling all my different jobs, but sometimes they falter. And often it's training that falters for me. I'm not like Emily. I don't always prioritize it as number one. And when it does, it puts me in a bad mood, and then I don't get as much activity, and then I'm not as efficient at my other work, and it's sort of a vicious cycle. So I've tried to, over the years, learn how to make it work and fit it in. And sometimes that's doing it early in the morning or late at night. And sometimes it's 3 or 4 days of just nonstop work. And I kind of start to go insane, and I make up for it by having a really big day in the hills.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. So where are you on that spectrum right now? We're going to talk a little bit about where you've been, but are you in top fitness mode? Are you in recovery and rebuilding mode? Would you put yourself?
I would say I'm in recovery and rebuilding mode. I just got back from a big trip, and I've been taking it fairly easy, but also have had some really nice long days. So working my way back to what I think is the next coming weeks being a full-on effort to just get back to fitness.
Yeah, well, we should dive into that trip, but I think you and I came home at almost exactly the same time. And you've had more big days than I have, for sure. I've been like, damn, how do you get out again? I've heard biking around the lake, climbing around the hull. I'm sure there's some I haven't heard about. Like you're doing all right.
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
Does everything go on Strava? Is that a good place for people to follow, like what Jim's training actually looks like?
Yeah, I don't usually put climbing on Strava, but if there's a big component of approach, then I do.
Climbing on Strava, Jim.
No.
Fun.
What do you, when you go to the crag and you just climb a few pitches, next thing you know, you're going to be one of those people that's like, I commuted to work 8 minutes.
That absolutely goes on my Strava. I walked to the 7-Eleven 2 blocks away. That goes on.
Everything counts.
I've got 2 or 3 of those friends.
Guess I'm one of them.
Yeah, but most things go on Strava.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a believer of if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen.
Yeah. It's definitely the main way I have a few friends like you. It's the main way I know kind of like what you've been up to. Like, of course, you use social media as well. And of course, we text and stay in touch. But like, if I want to know what Jim's been up to, I really look at Strava.
Yeah,
It's fun. That's what I love it for. It's a really good platform for that.
it's pretty good. And that's what it's for me too. It's for staying in touch with my friends and tracking what I've been up to and seeing what they've been up to.
Yeah.
It's not a race or like what a lot of people outside of Strava communities, people perception of it is. It's this ultra competitive race. That's not what it is at all.
Yeah. It's definitely not that for me either. Although it does certainly remind me when I get into those cycles where I miss a bunch of days of like training or working out because I am at Alpenglow too much or like just everything kind of builds up. It is one of the things that pulls me back in, like, shoot, Sam's skiing, or you went skiing yesterday, or these different things, being like, I need to reprioritize that. Like every now and then it's that extra kick. It's not exactly competition, but it's a reminder that people are finding ways to play. Full. Everyone's life is busy and full. That's just fine.
Yeah, I always look at the that crew that's out on the West Shore at like 5 a.m. every morning, and you're like, well, they're doing it. I could have gotten up and made it out there, but we all know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you Strava your latest expedition?
Yeah, parts of it, most of it.
We'll direct the conversation a little bit. You have a first descent that you just claimed in Pakistan. Tell us a little bit about that adventure.
Well, we went to Pakistan and we tried to climb and ski the Great Trango Tower, which is this iconic rock formation in the Karakoram Mountains that certainly I and many of us have like looked at and known through climbing history my whole life. And we went
Key being climbing history.
we went on this expedition last year to try to climb and ski this rock spire, and we were unsuccessful. And we went back this year again, and at the very end of our trip made it to the summit and skied down. So it was a wildly successful endeavor, and I'm pretty fired up about it.
Where did the inspiration for that ski line come from? You look, as you mentioned, the Great Trango Tower is a notable climbing ascent. I wouldn't say it's a notable skiing ascent. How did you spot that line? Was it your partners? Kind of tell us a little bit about that process.
I mean, in terms of it being a notable skiing line, people asked me this year after we'd already been there, has anyone ever done that? And my answer was typically, no one's ever thought about it.
Yeah.
It's very off the map. And it came from, I was climbing with Andreas Marin and Anna Pfaff in Indian Creek. And they had been there on this expedition and they were telling me about their trip. And I was asking, they're alpinists. They climb really big, scary things that I don't really have a lot of interest in. And they were telling me about their warm-up run on climbing up Great Trango to get acclimatized for Nameless Tower. And I asked him, do you think I could do it? And Andres turned to me and he said, you could ski it. Jim, you could ski it.
And lights just started flashing.
Literally, I just stopped what I was doing. I was like, okay, we need to stop this little endeavor we have called climbing a crack in Indian Creek and start talking about this right now. What do you mean? How's that possible? Where's the snow? How do I do the research? And fast forward a bunch of time, Christina Lustenberger asked me to go on this trip to Pakistan. She asked Hillary and I to go, and I really wanted to go. Hillary was a little less excited about it because she'd been to Pakistan before. And then long-term, Hillary passed away. I was not sure what I was going to do with skiing in any capacity. Christina got this trip approved from the North Face to go to Pakistan, and she asked me to go with her. And as I started looking into it, I looked at this place they were going. It's called Snow Lake, and a bunch of people have been there. There's a bunch of cool free ride lines that have been done and lots more to do. I looked at that and I said, yeah, it looks pretty interesting, but I'll go if we can walk to Trango Tower. It's about 3 days walk from there. And I just want to look at this line and see if another time we could come back and pull it off. And she started doing the research and she started looking at it, and then she dove into the rabbit hole head first, like I think she tends to do.
Yep.
And we started sharing photos and getting excited about it. And eventually we called Nick McNutt, our third partner, and said, Nick, we're not going to Snow Lake. We're just going to Trango Tower. And he looked at it and was like, awesome. This sounds great. It's a big objective and a little more defined and a little more, aspirational than just going and skiing a bunch of cool lines.
Is Snow Lake lower as well in terms of altitude?
It's a little lower in altitude, and for some reason it gets a lot more snow. It's a little microclimate. There's a lot more snow there, and it's colder there. And
Actually, those all sound like good things as a skier, Jim.
more mini golfing. Yeah. Mini golf for the
Mini golf
Karakoram.
relative to being in the Karakoram.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that was last year. And so you went last year.
So we went last year, Christina, Nick, and I, and some camera friends that were supporting us, trying to film the whole endeavor. And we had a really good summit attempt early on in our trip. We were marching through some pretty technical and difficult terrain and got through some of the cruxes down low, and we're up on the upper glacier headed towards the summit. And I was leading up this pitch and all of a sudden stopped and looked in this massive crevasse. I was like, well, I better bring my partners up. And so I yelled down at them, and it's hard to hear each other, but we brought them up and everyone looked at the crevasse, and we spent a long time trying to figure out, can we get through this? Is there a way to get over this? And long story short, we decided it was going to take too much time and we needed to turn around and we should head down because we didn't have enough time to get through the crevasse and get to the summit and get back down. So we turned around and we came down and we went back to base camp and we recovered. We skied most of the line and we proved to ourselves it was skiable, but we didn't do it. We didn't get to the very top. So we spent the rest of the month there trying to find another weather window and the right conditions to go back to the summit. And multiple attempts were flummoxed by sickness amongst team members or snowfall or anxiety about the conditions or a whole bunch of reasons.
Sounds like Pakistan.
We didn't make it, and we didn't even really give it a good second effort.
And that first effort was early on your trip.
It was pretty early on the trip. Yeah. So we spent an entire month in base camp and eventually walked away in blue skies and perfect conditions. And
ouch.
I was gritting my teeth.
Yeah.
It was hard. And we came home and we'd had been in amazing mountains and skied most of the line, but still kind of felt unsuccessful.
Sure. Yeah. And so what is it about, like, obviously you failed on peaks before or ski lines before. You and I failed on a line in 2015 together. Yeah. Makalu dying. And you didn't go back the next year. What was it about Great Trango that you were like, not only am I going to go back, but it's going to be my focus. I'm going to go back next year.
Yeah. I think after some time went by, I just felt like it was so doable and so attainable. And I now figured out how to get through the system of planning and permitting and logistics and how to get to base camp and how to set it up. And where to make our high camp and how to climb through the rock crux and how to get to this massive crevasse.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, okay, this is a long weekend. It's not a big expedition. We can just go strike attack, make it happen. A long weekend's a gross exaggeration. But, I sort of boiled it into something that I felt like we were really likely to succeed at. And I just love the idea of skiing this line. It's such a cool, iconic mountain that's just storied and so much of my imagination about what Pakistan and what the Karakoram mountains are like, and all the way back to like Galen Roll trekking with 100 Balti porters to Alex Lowe and Greg Child and Ross Kelly climbing, this crazy piece of rock. And why do these climbers like Emily, your wife, would go to these places and try to climb at 20,000 feet on rock that's too hard for me to climb at sea level? It just fascinated me, and being able to experience that summit and then ski back down kind of sums up why I love ski mountaineering.
Absolutely. I mean, go ahead.
Well, so you talked about a big gaping crevasse at the top. You talked about a rock crux. You talked about steep pitching it out on steep snow. What did the whole objective involve from a technical standpoint? And it sounds like it kind of brought all the skills of a ski mountaineer together into kind of one objective.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, you could, alpinists would solo this route, good ones. Andres climbed with his partners and made it to the top, and they used a lot of ropes climbing up, and they rappelled a lot on the way back down. But he went back and he soloed it with a rope, and he used a rope to get through sections, and he rappelled back down in sections. So it's not like this is, wildly difficult climbing. But for skiers, there's definitely some technical sections. There's a section of rock that we climbed the first year that was probably, we called it 5'9" rock climbing. It wasn't hard, but in ski boots and crampons and ice axes, it was technical, and we fixed a rope there and got through it. Christina led through that pitch and hammered in some pitons and put some nuts in, and was, out there on the sharp end getting after it, and
Cool.
was awesome. There's steep snow and steep ice. We placed a lot of ice screws climbing and used a rope to actually protect quite a bit of the climb. And then the crevasse was
Glacier travel
was the sort of no-go turnaround point until this year.
Awesome.
And it was still technical enough, the crevasse, right? That you had to like climb down into it, climb out of it, rappel into it, climb out of it. Like, it's a big crevasse.
Yeah, so this year we came back and we got up to it, and it had moved down slope a little bit and was a little different, but still the far side of the crevasse, it was, 10 to 20 meters wide across it, and the far side of it was 10 to 20 meters tall, probably closer to 20 meters tall. And it wasn't like you could go climb the wall of the crevasse. It's layers of ice and snow compressed over many, many years, but it wasn't very protectable, and it was, overhanging ice. So we climbed down into it and walked across a snow bridge kind of downhill into our climber's left, and then climbed back out of it on the other side. It was really pretty benign and really pretty simple. And we got through it pretty quickly. So this year we were psyched. We got on the other side of it. I think it was 10:30 in the morning, something like that, pretty early. We were really high on the mountain. We only had maybe 400 meters more to go to the summit, and we thought we had it in the bag. And then we started climbing from there, and it was really deep, really difficult trail breaking at high altitude. And it was slow going, and we used plates on our feet to sort of keep us more on top of the snow surface most of the time. And we got up high, and we got into some technical pitches where we put in some screws and used a rope a bunch again, and finally made it to the top and got onto the last couple pitches to the summit. And I climbed up onto this summit ridge, and then eventually stood on the summit and looked out at the range of the Karakoram and was staring at K2 and G1 and G2 and G4 and Broad Peak and Masherbrum.
A few famous ones around there.
Yeah, it's just wild to hear about and read about and see photos of all these peaks your whole life, and then just see them for the first time with your eyes all at once in this sort of panoramic viewpoint, all while you could basically throw a snowball off of a 6,000-foot cliff that's about 3 feet away from you. So pretty cool.
Wild.
Yeah.
And I assume you were the only team on the mountain.
Yeah, we were the only ones there last year and this year. We were the only ones in the Baltoro Valley.
Because climbing season is later, right?
Yeah, we would run into the Army guys that were working on the road, and they would see us and they would get so excited, and they would come up to us and want to shake all of our hands and want to say hi and take photos. And they hadn't seen anybody else since the previous fall. So they just sort of had this long, lonely, cold winter in the Karakoram. And when we come back, we sort of identify them with just, I don't know, new people and excitement, and they were psyched. So.
And is this, for skiers considering skiing bigger peaks in the Karakoram, is this kind of like the season, do you think? Like, you have other people ski during this time?
Yeah, I mean, other people have gone in April and in May to other places, Layla Peak and things like that. April, May, and June have been when most people have skied in the Karakoram. Where we went specifically, nobody'd really been there in April before.
Yeah, because there's winter ascents on the Trango sometimes, right? And then summer.
And Christina and I tried to talk to everyone we could and get as much beta as we could about when to go and learn everything we could before we went. And essentially we were just met with, I don't know, no one's ever been there at that time either.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work. Maybe it's a good idea. And we just sort of used the rest of our knowledge from all the other seasons and different places to pick what we think's the best timing. And I think it was pretty good timing. Mountain was in pretty good condition.
Yeah. And do you think, so we've talked about Great Trango is like one of the most iconic peaks on the planet, right? And the Trango Towers in general, from a climbing perspective, like you've skied perhaps the most iconic big mountain line on the planet, the Couloir on Lhotse. Is this an iconic ski line? Do you think we're going to see more ski descents of it? Are you excited to see more people? Are there other lines that you saw? You're like, they should go to that. What happens to skiing in the Trangos?
I mean, hopefully Nick Russell will go there next year and ski it.
All right. Snowboard it?
Make the first snowboard descent.
Because he's following you, right? Did Papsura?
He while we were there, was on Papsura, which is this incredible ski line that Hillary and I did in 2017 in India.
Yeah.
And he went back and got it in amazing conditions.
Great conditions.
With Jerry Mark, and they shredded it, I think. I think it was hard and high altitude, and they took lots of long breaks, but on a relative basis, they got it in really good conditions. And so do I think people will go back and ski this? I hope somebody does. I hope somebody's inspired to go get it in good conditions, but I think I'm more desirous of it just opening up people's minds to what's possible and what's out there. And in terms of ski mountaineering, we have not even hardly scratched the surface of what can be done. And I think there's some in our adventure world, there's some people that think everything's been done and now you have to like come up with some contrived way to do something new, but not in ski mountaineering. It's just ranges of mountains that nobody's touched and amazing skiing at, moderate altitude all the way to extreme altitude that people have never done.
Yep.
Somebody just skied the last 8,000 meter peak. And
yes.
There's lots of lines on lots of those mountains that have never been done. And
yeah, I feel like you and I have been talking about this recently in the past few weeks. Like, it's always dangerous to call something the golden age of, a sport, right? But I absolutely agree with what you just said. It's so easy to get caught up in that cycle of like, oh, everything cool has been done in the big mountains, or big mountains are a shit show and they're too busy and they're this and they're that and the luxury and blah, 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 and the helicopters and all the rest. All things that we do have to consider how we use, why we use. But specifically, ski mountaineering in higher altitudes, which I think Trango suddenly fits into, and the 8,000 meter peaks suddenly fit into. Like, I think we are just approaching like this really exciting time where more and more people are going, and maybe just like you did, kind of opening eyes to the fact that like it doesn't have to be, powder skiing from top to bottom in ideal conditions when you go to search out these lines. It could be,
Yeah,
but
I do a lot of that. I do a lot of powder skiing in ideal conditions.
Sure.
And I want to admit that I often complain about it. Not often, but occasionally complain about it. And the people I complain about it to think I'm insane. And they're like, no one has ever said that they didn't like powder skiing. But when you are just down on the West Shore and it
Yep.
snows almost every day all winter,
Yep.
and you're skiing nearly perfect conditions every day on the same runs, for me, it gets a little bit
Over it.
boring. And
Sure.
I want the challenge of going and doing something a little bit weirder and wilder and
Yep.
crazier, and sometimes really scrappy, just sum it up with shitty conditions is a good way to challenge yourself and make it fun.
Yeah. And with that perspective, I do feel like you said, like the surface has barely been scratched. There are just unlimited lines in so many different places, but especially in the greater ranges. That now, utilizing the skills that people are building, whether it's at Palisades or in Chamonix or in the Canadian Rockies, Telluride, bringing those to the greater ranges, people who are willing to live expedition life, willing to have some of that suffering, willing to have that potential for failure that's out of their control, right? Like a lot of times, just like I think on Trango your first year, you didn't fail because of a lack of skill or a lack of desire or a lack of fitness. It was all these other pieces maybe were a little out of your control that had to fit together. But with that mindset and that willingness to fail, like, yeah, I truly believe it's unlimited. And the cool thing is I see more and more skiers from Europe and the US, especially right now, going and trying them. People I've never heard of. It used to be we knew everyone who was, especially on 8,000 meters. And now I'm like, wait, there were probably skiers on every 8,000 meter peak in spring.
Yeah.
And I didn't know half of them.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
I think you've certainly had a part of like causing that to happen, right? Like things like Lhotse, that finally getting skied, like that was a moment in the industry, I think.
Yeah. It's cool.
Pretty cool. Well done.
Well, I mean, you bring up Lhotse, Adrian, and Lhotse, I think, Jim, is probably one of your most notable, if not the most notable accomplishment. With Kanchenjunga just being skied, the last 8,000 meter peak, and also being skied without oxygen, does that kind of enter your interest for future descents? Skiing more of these lines that have been skied, but skiing them without oxygen. Is that on your radar?
I don't. Skiing 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen isn't something that I think gets me excited. I'm more interested in skiing really big, wild, audacious lines and skiing them well, skiing them in good style. So if it's
Is there any such thing as style without oxygen?
if it's going to extreme altitude and it's to do it and to try to ski well, I've been there before with oxygen.
Yeah.
And it's really hard with oxygen. I've also been without oxygen and it's really, really hard. So for me, I think I'd rather use the gas and be able to ski a little bit more reasonably and a little bit farther in between stopping and recover a little bit faster, which is what the oxygen helps with.
Absolutely.
It's still often 3 turns and stop for 5 minutes, and really
Better than one turn.
unglamorous skiing. But better than 1 turn and not really even making 3 turns and stopping and side slipping, and but there are people out there doing amazing things without oxygen, and I think it's awesome and rad and certainly cool. And I don't know, Adrian and I have talked a lot about all the big ascents and big mountains and descents typically have a little asterisk next to what you did and how you did it. And I think it's great to go climb to the top of Popsura and make the first ascent of it. Hillary and I were super proud of doing that, and Figgenshaw that was with us down climbed a lot of it and skied some of it, and then flash I don't know, 5 years later, Nick and Jerry go there and snowboard it and do it in a little bit better style in terms of how they come down. And eventually somebody maybe will go there and get it in really good conditions and be really acclimated and properly shred it. And it's one of the most beautiful ski lines, snowboard lines anywhere in the world. And yeah, I like to see the progression of it.
Yeah. That's what I feel really strongly about, is the allowing for the progression through, I think, like you said, like we've talked a lot in the big wall climbing world as well with Emily and things like that. Everyone's big wall ascents, everyone's big mountain ascents, they do have asterisks, meaning little things that we've used, whether it's diamox or dexamethasone or oxygen or fixed ropes, or Sherpa support, a boot pack that's already in. There's endless examples in climbing of, kind of asterisk to the purity of an ascent. And I think the same is true with a descent. And I just think like so important that we kind of like acknowledge, own, and discuss those things, because that is part of what allows for the next generation. Things just like you said, in perhaps a better style, or, I love the idea that we're going to see things get skied in a more and more like in a better flow, right? When you see like a Lusty or a Sam Antaman or a Jeremy Heights a face versus me being a face, it's a really different thing. And I think that's a really exciting next step of sport, as people bring those kind of ways of seeing higher and higher. Like I think you did some on Trango. Like I've seen a little bit of video. And it's like, oh, that's real skiing, right? But you're on a big mountain line. And so I'm excited to continue to see that. I do personally, because I've struggled so hard to try to do things without oxygen. Like this next phase, we talked about it a little bit. This next phase of starting to read lines without oxygen, I think is really cool. So like Makalu, which I got 2 years ago, just got skied this season without supplemental oxygen. Similar use of like ropes in places. I think they had to take their skis off a bit more than I did because of conditions here, but like they did it top to bottom without supplemental oxygen. Like that is fucking wild, because I know how I felt there. I think it'll be amazing that, like, I don't know if anyone's tried Lhotse since you guys ski.
I don't think people have really given it a try, but somebody will ski it
For
without
sure.
oxygen.
Or I mean, I would love to see it get its second descent with or without oxygen, right?
Yeah,
Or
it's
just
a
be
pretty cool ski run.
such like, once again, I was on the summit of Everest, and the only thing I want to look at is like Makalu and then the Couloir on Lhotse. They're just the most iconic peak.
Yeah.
That's a line I want to see
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, for sure.
Did success on Lhotse change your perspective or what you look for in a descent? Was that kind of pivotal for you, or was it just a proud line?
I mean, it was, to be honest, when we got down and we came over the Bertrand, Hillary and I were pinching ourselves and very much asking, did we do that? Did that just happen? I mean, we were ecstatic and shocked and stoked that we pulled it off. But it was just a progression in my life. I've been staring at these pictures and reading about alpinists and mountaineers my whole life, and was a little kid skiing on the side of the cat track trying to make a turn where it was too steep to make a turn, and just slowly progressing. How can I push that a little bit farther? And then it started as a teenager here in the Sierras, going on expeditions to the Palisade Glacier, and just has always progressed. And Lhotse was definitely a moment where I was like, okay, I took sort of the lifelong dream line and figured out how to make it happen. So, what's next? What else can we do?
You tell us.
I mean, there's lots to do out there. There's lots of things that I've tried to do that I'd like to go back and finish. There's this Trango line was really cool to put so much effort into. We were in base camp or above base camp for 59 days, which is just, I mean, an obscene amount of time for one ski run.
Yeah.
And,
How much vertical was the line?
I mean, it's about 7,000 vertical feet from base camp to the summit.
Sure.
But the skiing was probably, I mean, we skied most of that. We probably had to down climb in the gully back down close to base camp about 1,000 to 1,500 vertical feet.
Okay. So 2 months of your life for 2 Talak laps.
Yeah, the second month, the first month was to go from the crevasse down, and we skied that fairly continuously, and most of the gully was actually skiable. We down climbed very little last year. The second trip, I went from the summit down to the crevasse in one continuous ski.
That's pretty.
I skied off the summit and then stopped just above the crevasse, and that took 1 minute and 4 seconds.
Wow.
So it's sort of funny to think that I went back to Pakistan, trained for the whole winter, and focused on this month-long, really almost 6-week-long expedition to get another 1 minute and 4 seconds of skiing.
It is funny, and yet, I mean, to us, obviously, it's just so obvious, right? It's like you hadn't climbed the mountain, you hadn't skied the mountain, like.
And that's what it's about. It is important to get to the top, and it's just a goal in life. It's something a bar we set for ourselves, and it could be, I want to walk 2 miles in my neighborhood, and I've never done it before, and I haven't been able to pull it off, and I want to go a little farther. I want to do a little more. It's just a goal that I set for myself to try to achieve, and then once you achieve it, you're usually like, okay, what else am I going to do? And I mean, that's how I got into Ironman, and somebody tried to tell me I could swim from point A to point B, and I was like, I'm going to die if I did that. There's no way I could swim 2 miles. But eventually I forced myself to do it, and yeah, it provided me a lot of self-satisfaction.
And so do you, with this success of kind of talking to an alpinist and finding a ski line, is that a technique you're spending more time doing now? Are you talking to lots of alpinists?
No, definitely. I would answer that with a resounding no. I mean, I'm super impressed with the lines that alpinists try to like climb and what they're after, but it's not really a strong passion of mine to go suffer on the north side of a mountain in a cold, icy, dark place and throw my tools into the ice. But there are just, I sort of look for aesthetic lines in skiing, really beautiful ski lines, and they're often on really big mountains. So that's kind of my passion. And at the same time, I want to go rock climbing. I want to get better.
Yeah, the amount of time Jim speaks to my wife about his dreams in rock climbing, it's like
I want to climb a route as hard as Emily could do, like without trying.
That's a pretty good bar. I mean, generally the things that I'm working on are their M's warm-ups, right? When M's in really good shape, her warm-ups are my dream route.
Yeah.
So you should just get on that program with me.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Much,
it's the late 40s ski mountaineer climbing program.
Part of my passion in life is in the mountains has always been derived from rock climbing, and from just a lot of the best rock climbers were the best mountaineers and the best alpinists. And, I just sort of feel like, well, if I've been passionate about this my whole life, and I've been teaching myself how to rock climb when I was in 8th or 9th grade, and learning how to rappel out the side of my house, like hoping that the anchor I built on the toilet was going to hold, which was really bad, not safe.
There's 2 bolts there, though.
Yeah, it's got to be good.
I think that I've started kind of came to a place later in life where I was like, I should learn how to do this at a respectable level instead of just being a 5'10" climber.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great activity as well. And actually one you can push quite far close to home and with a relatively high degree of safety.
Yeah. And you can do it in the sun, and it's warm, and your friends are there. And
except for tomorrow on the Hulk. It's not going to be warm and sunny.
Tomorrow's definitely going to be colder than any day on Trango. I want video. Well, you mentioned passion, and of course, anyone listening to this podcast knows you lost your partner in the mountain, Hillary, on Manaslu. And I think Great Trango is one of the first big objectives you've done since then, maybe first. Can you speak a little bit to how were you unsure of your passion? How did the passion feel, and how does it feel moving forward to survive that and find a way.
Yeah, I mean, when I was on Monaslu and Hillary started a little avalanche and slid by me, and I lost her, and I looked for her for hours, and I wasn't sure where she'd gone, where she ended up. In that moment, when that happened, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be on that mountain. I didn't think it was reasonable to be there. I couldn't understand why we were there and why we were doing this. And I thought the entire concept of what we were doing was just not right and crazy. I was worried about her kids. I was worried about her, and I couldn't accept why we were there and what we were doing. And I essentially, in that moment, didn't want to be a skier and didn't want to climb up on any mountain ever, like even a small hill in my backyard. As time went by, I remember a moment where I was showing someone a photo that we were going to use in her memorial. And when I looked at the photo and I looked at the snow on the side of the photo, I wanted to make a turn there. I wanted to like feel that feeling of what it's like to slide through that snow and turn in that spot. And it sparks my imagination, like maybe you do want to keep doing this a little bit. And over time, I found my way back into the mountains, and I coaxed myself back into the solitude and the presence that the mountains provide me when I'm just out there, whether it's alone or with friends, or in this first day was with my dog. And then, I had a great winter with a lot of friends supporting me, and found a lot of good things from going out and skiing really benign powder and Tahoe and Telluride and Jackson Hole and other places, but all close to home. And then I got invited to go on this trip, and I wasn't sure how I would handle it, and I wasn't sure if I could handle it. And part of it was Trango Tower and this big audacious goal of trying to climb and ski this mountain that I just thought was rad. And part of it was just, well, this is going to be really, really hard, and it's going to be good for me. And I spent a ton of time in a tent just reflecting on life without Hillary, and how am I going to sleep in this tent without her with me? She'd been with me on everything I'd done for so long, and it helped me process life without her. And it still sucks. It'll always suck. It's not something I am going to get over or learn to accept entirely. It's just something that I'll always be working on, and it's a burden that I'll just carry with me forever. But going on that trip to Pakistan, I think was kind of like putting salt in the wound to some degree. It was hard and it hurt, and there were moments there where I was shattered and crushed, and I tried to lean on certain team members to help me through that difficult time. And then I was also met with all the dynamics of trying to get to the top of the mountain and not being able to put all those parts and pieces together, which was equally hard and frustrating. Fast forward a year, I'm in a much better place emotionally and therefore physically, and we found success, and I feel like there's real risk in the things that I do, and there's real risk in the things that all of us do on a day-to-day basis. And I choose to take some of those risks that people might not take and might not think are reasonable, but I take them in a really calculated way. And I don't think we did anything on Great Trango Tower that was that risky. We were very pragmatic and very cautious and very careful. That's why we were there for 59 days.
Could have done it in a long weekend.
And yeah, but I got a lot out of it, and hopefully, it'll inspire a lot of people to go out and push themselves and set their bar a little bit higher than it was, and go push into something that they don't know if they can or can't do. learn how to swim. You can make it to the other side of the pool, and then eventually you turn around and come back.
Oh yeah. That's what Arrow, our son, is trying to learn right now, but he definitely couldn't make it to the other side of the pool right now. But
Yeah.
hopefully we're inspiring him too. No, I appreciate that, Jim. I mean, of course your exploits inspire people and all of us. But it's your choice to forward and find a way back to the mountains also inspires, and there is a way, and we all take risks, knowing the pain must be unimaginable, but also there is a choice. There is a reward. It's important to see.
Yeah. And I'd have this. I've had a very fortunate life, and I've had some really wonderful opportunities to do things that not everybody gets to do. And I've had some terrible loss that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But if I hadn't have decided to move forward after losing my family and hadn't accepted the love that I had for Hillary, I wouldn't have had all that. And pushing myself to embrace that and to try hard at it and to lean into it took me to some of the highest highs that I think humans can have, certainly that I've ever had. And, you talked about Lhotse as being one of those good runs. It was definitively the best ski run of my life. It also included some of the worst snow I've ever skied and some of the best. But I wouldn't have been there had I not been there with Hillary. And we did that mountain. We climbed that mountain together and pushed each other a lot to make it there, and took a lot out of it together as partners, and both as climbing partners and life partners. And I'm going to try to figure out how to go do all of that and write a whole nother book in my life and find out what's next. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to embrace it and be present with it and accept the beauty of this magnificent day with the trees and the sky and the sun and little tiny bits of snow.
Very tiny bits of sun-cupped dirty snow. Well, I like that a lot. And I love thinking that Lhotse is the best ski run of your life, but it's also the best ski run of your life so far, right? And
Yeah.
I am very excited to see some of the upcoming ones.
Yeah. Me too.
It won't be today.
No, the Sun Cup snow, not today. Well, we'll kind of wrap it up. We've got 2 questions for you, duffel shuffle questions. We want to hear your best duffel shuffle story, trains, planes, automobiles, whatever it takes.
And usually we give our guests a heads up about these questions, but I forgot to send them to you. So you're just on the spot.
Authentic.
I'm going to go with, we were just talking about Lhotse, and this was an expedition I think I dreamed about doing most of my life. We talked about it in 2015 when we were on Makalu. The 4 of us talked about going to Lhotse.
Yep. We flew out right past it.
We were really excited about it. And I think Makalu really sort of opened the door to say, okay, we should go do this next. And I'd done a bunch of other expeditions and a bunch of things, and we had difficulty with getting that trip funded and difficulty in pulling it off. And we basically cobbled it together in weeks before we left. And so the duffel shuffle for that was monumental, trying to organize the logistics with a new partner in Kathmandu and doing it on a shoestring budget and putting all the duffel bags and flying over there. And the long answer is we got there and we got to base camp and our bags arrived at the same moment as we did. There was a lot of bad weather and a lot of the porters and yaks that had been pushing our bags up the Khumbu got there the same time we did, which was better than them coming after us.
Yeah.
And then we started fixing through the ice fall with our tiny little team, and we made it up, made a camp 1 and made a camp 2, and Hillary and I walked down and got our dome tent, our 2-meter dome tent, which weighs like 50 pounds, and carried that back up to Camp 2 and set it up, and just had an endless amount of gear and weight and duffels, but we didn't have any skis. Our skis
They hadn't arrived?
and our boots had still not made it to base camp. And so we walked down from acclimatizing at Camp 2 to base camp, looking at weather, thinking, okay, this next weather window is our summit push. And we didn't have skis and boots because they still hadn't made it. And
Yeah.
they came just in time. And the next day we left and we went to the summit. And like that whole thing was like miraculous that we pulled it off. But also just the fact that we got the duffels moved around was
The duffel shuffle
sweet.
worked.
Yeah, it's the thing. Duffel shuffle.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And I like that you kind of include all the logistics of it, because that's what, when we named this podcast, it's like, it's all the bullshit that goes behind the scenes that no one sees, whether it's in a 20-minute movie or a great photo. Like, it's all of that that actually makes probably the most memorable parts of the trip and the struggle. And that's what those are the stories we're trying to like share and delve into podcast. So that's a good one. I'm glad your skis arrived.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would have been an alpinist. Okay, and the second question we like to ask everyone is, on that next duffel shuffle, what is the first thing that goes into those duffel bags? Like the most important thing that you just wouldn't go on an expedition without?
I mean, that one's really easy.
The skis and boots, because they would get forgotten.
Even more important than that would be the stove and the coffee.
Nice.
The AeroPress has to be in. I mean, I when I go on an expedition, I take an AeroPress in my carry-on bag, and I use the little kettle in the hotel room till I get to the mountain, and then I have a stove. And I'm always talking to the logistics person about needing a canister really early on to put into my stove because you can't fly with the fuel canister. And they're always like, but you don't need that until here. And I'm like, no, I need it like right away because I'm going to make coffee early in the morning and I'm not going to wait for everyone else to wake up.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Glad our coffee addiction is on the same plane. We can still climb and ski together.
Actually, I have the little ABM wedding.
Oh, the wedding AeroPress.
This is my, like, that's the carry-on bag
It was
AeroPress.
a good one. We need an AeroPress sponsorship. We're not sponsored, but have you seen the new AeroPress yet? The party size one?
No.
They're making, Graham brought one to Everest. They make a new party wave AeroPress. It's like good for like 4 people. It's like this wide. I'm like making this thing. It's like that tall. And it is awesome. You just push once, on this thing and you make coffee for your whole team. So everyone needs one. I don't know what they really call it. I just call it the party wave AeroPress. But yeah, coffee's. Well, Jim, where do people find you if they would like to follow your upcoming exploits, whatever they might be, in rock climbing? That's what's coming up. But other than Strava, how should people find you?
I guess they could find me on Instagram. I have an Instagram
Still use that?
social media presence that I frequently post there and make stories at multiple times per year.
Great. Is that Jim Morrison? At Jim Morrison?
Yeah, I think it's Jim W. Morrison.
All right.
Yeah.
At Jim W. Morrison.
And yeah, hopefully I'll tell more of my story there someday.
Excellent.
Well, Jim, thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Great conversation, and we wish you the best on your future exploits.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
One of my favorites. Thanks for making the time and fitting it in between adventures. I was like, we get to hang out and chat a lot, but actually just put you on the spot for an hour or so is really special for me. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to be here. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks for listening to episode 6 of the Duffel Shuffle. It's been really fun shifting gears from climbing and talking with Jim Morrison about ski mountaineering. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, rate us, and leave us a review. It's incredibly helpful in getting our show out there. Episode 7 will launch July 1st, so stay tuned.